GameChanger by Rocco Jarman. Chapter 2. Wearing the Hat and Catching the Disease. This book contains several working hypotheses. Most people who think they mistrust science and scientists do not really mistrust science or scientists. Not really. When you take an airplane flight or fill your car with fuel, if you undergo an x-ray or take an aspirin for a headache, if you get an anesthetic injection at the dentist, if you use GPS to navigate or heat a bowl of soup in a microwave oven, you absolutely trust science and scientists. When someone says they do not trust science, what they really mean is they do not trust the way they have seen it practiced. They have been exposed perhaps to only poor examples. As it happens, when someone says they do not trust mysticism and spirituality, it is fair to say what they really mean is they do not trust the way they have seen it practiced. Likely they have been exposed only to poor examples. In either case, they simply cannot discern the difference between the method, where it leads, and the way they have seen it practiced and embodied, and they are unaware of how much is owed to either, or how they are windows into the same room. Science does not claim to have all the answers. It claims to have a really reliable method for asking better questions and remaining open to new answers. Its utility is in guarding, in fact, against the very human nature of both reaching false conclusions and being resistant to changing them. It is a way we have been able to transcend our human nature and open our eyes to a scope of wonder far beyond our reach. As our understanding grows, the rules and boundaries change, and the methods need to adapt accordingly. In the same vein, our mistake has been to assume mysticism should be regarded any differently. In no way should it ever claim to present the full and only answer. This has been the core mistake of religion, a confusion that bled its way into our understanding of mysticism and spiritual practices. These should in fact be regarded in precisely the same manner, a method for asking better questions, a method to transcend our human nature, opening our eyes to our level of connection with that world of wonder, and how we might exceed our reach. As our connection deepens, we change, and the methods need to adapt accordingly. As adherents, our mistake was to treat mysticism as fixed and infallible. As skeptics, our mistake was to dismiss mysticism as hokum. We are in both cases, with science and mysticism, trying to look at the eternal from behind a veil of our limited senses, flawed assumptions, and limited understanding. We are changing. The nature of the universe is one of change. It has been pointed out quite fairly, I believe, that we are in a creating universe, not a created universe. One fixed lens, cut and polished 1,000 years ago, even a generation ago, cannot be indelible forever. For our mysticism to work as intended, as it perhaps once did, we need to revise and adapt it. This is essential for both the adherents and the skeptics, neither of whom arrived at their beliefs or their doubts dishonestly. I am not a scientist. I do not conduct peer reviews or double-blind randomized studies. I had neither the inclination nor the time. I also do not believe that understanding the world better or being part of the solution requires an academic degree. But I do believe that whatever suggestions or claims anyone makes about what is true or useful about the present moment, the world, and how we fit in it, needs to be testable, verifiable, and something that can be submitted to the scientific method. The scientific method is the process of objectively establishing facts through testing and experimentation. The basic process involves making an observation, forming a hypothesis, making a prediction, conducting an experiment, and finally analyzing the results. There is one commonly held misunderstanding about the scientific method. In almost all cases, hypotheses which are sustained should be subjected to the kind of tests and studies that fairly discount all the data which could lead to biased interpretation. In the physical world of reductionist science, this is a perfectly serviceable model. It is quite essential because it allows us to go beyond our assumptions, misgivings, and expectations. It allows us to expand our understanding, allowing nature and reality to surprise us rather than allowing our coveted but false beliefs to keep our understanding small and ultimately incorrect. We do this by devising and carrying out careful tests, gathering data over various iterations, considering all the variables and factors that might be responsible for the causes we are trying to determine the effect for. By choosing to act this way, we avoid confusing correlation for causation. The ultimate prize of science is in determining the truth, the nature of reality, which is another way of saying we are seeking to understand the relationship between cause and effect. In this enterprise, it would be pointless to fixate on correlations that overlook actual causation, and it helps to subject our intuitions to the mercy of objectivity. The mistake is to try and apply this approach strictly to hypotheses about our internal truth and experience, which by definition cannot be accurately discerned or verified by anyone else except ourselves. There is an answer we have not become comfortable with yet as a species: objective subjectivity. The fact that I'm not a scientist and have not submitted my hypotheses to the requisite level of testing and validation by my peers means I do not feel authentic or entitled to make spurious claims about quantum physics or the like. But I do not exactly know who my peers are or how to collaborate with them, not yet. But after a few people have read this book, maybe I will find some peers and we can continue to test my hypotheses together. That said, there is no reason I want to go about trampling over the scientific method either. Just because I am not a scientist does not mean I do not want to reason like one. I do not want to be wrong about anything for a moment longer than is necessary. This is the beauty of a working hypothesis. A working hypothesis is where you can act as if something is true without confusing yourself. When you debate with sincerity, in the real spirit of debate, the objective is to determine what is right, rather than who is right. To do this earnestly, there is a stance one takes when presented with an argument that provides a strong counter to your own belief or intuition. Credited to multiple sources is the notion that the truest sign of intelligence is the ability to entertain two contradictory ideas simultaneously. James Bond Stockdale, Jim to his friends, was a United States Navy Vice Admiral and aviator who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his leadership and bravery during the Vietnam War. The circumstances surrounding his endeavors was that of being captured and held as a prisoner of war for over 7 years, and held the unenviable distinction of being the most senior naval officer held captive in Hanoi, North Vietnam during the war. There is a famous formulation based on a quote of his which came to be known as the Stockdale paradox. This is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be." Unquote. This and other contributions in the same vein have made Stockdale and his work prized in the field of daring leadership. The core message of the quote was around the merit of the willingness to entertain paradoxes and look at the facts that are uncomfortable, inconvenient, and perhaps undermine our beliefs and even our hope, in the service of determining what rather than who is right. Writer, cognitive scientist, and contemporary philosopher Daniel Dennett coined the term steelmanning. The term is a play on the related straw manning, a common but disingenuous trick used in rhetoric style of debating, where the objective is to win rather than arrive at truth. The term straw manning conjures up the image of the straw man dummy used in target practice, stationary, unable to defend itself, and a poor imitation of an actual opponent. It refers to the habit of framing the weakest version of someone's argument to make it conveniently simple to dismantle. Steelmanning is then the opposite of a straw man argument. The idea is to help one's opponent to construct the strongest form of their argument. It is what we might call taking an idea, especially one that is counterintuitive to us, even ones that we find confronting or potentially offensive, and trying them on like a hat. It is the birth of what we shall call objective subjectivity. It asks, how would the world appear to me if I accepted this were true? This does not always work. This is not because the approach is flawed, but rather because our execution of it is. We try the hat on, we trick ourselves into believing we are ready to give it a try. But secretly, sometimes even unbeknownst to ourselves, we are looking for a reason to reject it. We are open-minded, but not truly open-hearted. A working hypothesis is simply the stance of trying on the hat and really committing open-heartedly to the look. It is a kind of courage to notice our cognitive biases, our predisposition against something, the discomfort it triggers, and find a way to park that for a moment to really give the idea a real chance. It is a decision to choose courage over potential ignorance. When we embody an idea fully, our perspective changes. We see more. We understand more. Marvelously, it has a compounding effect. Our perception can be enhanced, and our discernment can grow from submitting to such a process, and our improvements in perception and discernment are lasting. This claim itself is testable and reproducible. Paradoxically, it helps to realize that we do not need to wear the hat forever. To realize we can take it off freely whenever we choose helps us reason our way into the requisite courage to adopt the idea wholeheartedly in the first place. This is the universal power of consent. It empowers rather than disempowers us. Consent relies on active and informed choice, something we can withdraw at any time. It is precisely this quality that can lend us the courage to make bolder choices, knowing that we can back away at any stage. Trying on a hat is not like catching a disease. There is real merit, however, in committing to the look. Remembering most of the ideas we covet and defend, we did not choose. We inherited them from our parents. We caught them like a virus from our journey through our childhood, our teenage years, our school and education, our cultural conditioning, and our religious and ideological indoctrination. Even as thinking, reasoning adults, many of the ideas which take hold do so subconsciously, subliminally, through direct and indirect suggestion, like viruses, through the Trojan horses of our emotions and psychological capture. To apply one's own conscious discernment and choose to take a bold bite out of an idea, hold it in the mouth, and digest a few mouthfuls is the act of conducting an experiment. The mouth can intuit but not really qualify accurately what the effect of something will be on the rest of the metabolism. Similarly, how an idea might affect the rest of our moral and psychological experience requires us to digest the idea and allow it to integrate through neural plasticity. We have already caught the disease of so many bad ideas. The only real cure is better ideas. This book contains many key and core ideas, a real first aid kit to triage and treat the modern psyche, and all you need is the courage to try them. The best case scenario is we get somewhere worth getting to. The very worst case for the courageous, discerning adult is nothing more than being wrong for a bit. To be a leader is to understand that doing something imperfectly with a right intent, a willingness to take on feedback, and a commitment to improve requires no time to get started and no barriers to starting. It should also require no permission and carry no risk of blame if mistakes are made. Actualization is the leadership of self. If it is not already clear, I am not aiming to convince anyone or persuade anyone. I shall gladly leave those two games to academia and ideology. It is a foregone conclusion that not everyone can be convinced. Despite how our institutions crow their overtures about philosophical virtues and the value of humility and leadership, they are engineered by incentive. We know that Big Pharma are not incentivized to provide health and wellness. They are incentivized to keep people consuming and dependent. We know that politicians are not incentivized to own mistakes or steer their wards in the direction of prosperity and progress. They are incentivized to avoid all culpability and favor their corporate funders. Similarly, banks are not incentivized to enrich their customer, nor insurance companies to protect theirs. Journalists are certainly not incentivized to keep the population informed or act as the watchdogs of society as they once might have. They are incentivized to peddle dramatic news and keep the population engaged. Despite the rhetoric of values and ethics, our institutions are incentivized such that their resulting unconscious design selects for traits of psychopathy and narcissism. Exceptions are remarkable precisely because they are rare. Conversely, our society rewards crowdthink as a prerequisite for being accepted by the majority. This is despite the counter-normative fact that it also idolizes anyone who is adept at capturing attention. These most adept brokers of attention control an economy which, with poetic irony again, selects strongly for the traits of psychopathy and narcissism. Convincing by intelligence, good faith argument and reason alone is never going to reach sufficiently wide into a captured majority, or high enough in any echelons of power who are benefiting from the status quo or themselves embroiled in the game. When it comes to the effort of convincing by means of intelligence, good faith and reason, Sam Harris is a red belt in that game. In Harris there exists a prodigious intellect and shining example of the power of reason, moral philosophy and sane argument. He is someone who is actively and formidably trying to steer social discourse away from the brink of self-destruction. He is legitimately non-partisan in his efforts, and despite the far left rapidly accusing him of being far right-wing, and the far right predictably the precise opposite. Plato said, "No one is hated more than he who speaks the truth." Not everyone understands this. Even in a population split evenly down the middle, speaking the truth should get you only hated by the half that disagree. But when both sides are so partisan that the divide becomes ideological, the first casualty is the actual truth. And speaking anything which undermines the selective truths in turn of either side is a sure recipe for being universally hated by both factions, suffering the symptoms of emotional capture of their ideologies. The other trades of convincing and persuasion are the ones that got us here in the first place. Religion, politics, media, and journalism are the industries who have mastered their trades and manipulate their eager markets with subtlety. They are the disease we have already caught. Their tools are indoctrination, coercion, subversion, propaganda, and other forms of psychological manipulation. The art is always one of selling safety in exchange for true freedom, offering distraction and comfort in exchange for true power. Therefore, I am aiming to do something other than convince or persuade. I am aiming to inspire. I am proposing an altogether different game.